Hit record.
So anyway, so that's an important thing, and I mean, I really wanted to especially focus on the segregation in terms of like high students grouping themselves together and low students grouping themselves together, because I feel like there are pros to that, but at the same time there are cons to that as well. Depending on like what your goal is with the group work, high students being in one group and low students being in another can be a good thing, but at the same time, there could be different goals where high students being together and low students being together can be a very, very bad thing.
Yeah, we actually have assigned seats in our classes, in all
Mhm.
our classes. And she specifically assigns it according to either IEPs or the high and low level. So,
So does she mix them up or put them together?
no, she tries to mix them up.
Okay.
She makes it so that, and also it kind of depends on your IEP. Some students need to sit closer to the front. Some students need to be in the back. We have a student that needs to be off on the side, like in the back by himself. But when it comes to the group work, you can see how it's like, there is a balance, you know. There's that quiet voice, and then there's the one that wants to talk and wants to say everything. But we're kind of teaching them to let everyone have a voice. That's kind of like what our goal is in the group work now. But I like having the assigned seats. I think that I get the idea of giving them freedom, and I think that is good practice for trust. But I think maybe it's like after getting to know them, we could give them some more freedom. Like, all right, now you guys are free to, you know, after a few weeks, you're free to sit where you'd like, but kind of push them to sit in other places, you know, like.
I mean, we haven't had like, in terms of class management or in terms of like their behavior, we haven't had like issues with them sitting where they want. Again, the only real issue that I've witnessed is the high-low segregation kind of stuff going on. But aside from that, like they're well, like when it's time to be serious, they're serious. Like they're not having trouble focusing or anything like that. And there are specific students that sit in the front. Sorry about that. And those are like the ones with the IEPs again. But for the most part, they don't have assigned seats at all. Like the ones that are like sitting in the front are usually the troublemakers, I guess you could call them. But at the same time, they usually have like an IEP that tells them that doesn't sit in the front, and that's really because they can't really focus otherwise.
That's interesting because even though we have assigned seats, our SL class still has.
I can't really hear you, darling.
Me? All right, let me put this back on. It was just bothering me, but. Sorry, this was like bothering me, but I'll leave it in. Even though we have, I think that's funny that even though we have assigned seats, we still have some behavior issues, and like in that part of the classroom management, we haven't figured out yet exactly what works best, because the students will talk to each other from across the room. They'll give each other signs to do certain things. I was telling Lorraine, I had one student kind of like signal off to another, like pretend you're on your phone. And then he called me over like, oh, miss, I think Johnny's on his phone. So I walk over and I'm like, put it away. And he's like, what? And then they're all laughing. So it's like, even if we sit them across the rooms, like it's hard to figure out what to do in that situation, you know?
Yeah, that is tough. I'm curious, like, do you guys think that assigned seating would be helpful in any way in terms of having students like have exposure to different ability levels, but also like, especially for group work, like some students kind of like move people along and stuff like that. Do you guys think it'd be helpful to do assigned seats?
I think it's super helpful. Just because, I mean, it's hard at first. I think it takes a lot of like training and guiding them. Like we did have to give them a sheet on like, you know, you have to, if someone says something, you know, let them know that you appreciate what they said, if you agree or disagree, and ask each other questions. Like if you see someone's not participating, maybe ask something that could reel them in, you know. So it's like trying to balance out those who are speakers and they're always ready to talk, and then kind of pull from those who are a little bit more quiet and maybe, you know, don't know what to say. But I think it helps. I think it helps a lot. In the groups that we have, they do amazing work.
For me, I feel like I have a couple of answers to that question. The first one that I would address is I feel like it depends on the class. I feel like usually at the beginning, I feel like maybe it's a good idea to assign seat if you have like some sort of like gauge of who should be sitting where. Like if you already know, like if you know somebody that knows your students and asks them to help you like make a seating chart or something like that, then that's great. If you don't know your students, obviously you can't really seat them until you know them. But I feel like if you know your students well enough to say, my students are mature enough to handle not needing seating, then you don't need to seat them. And I feel like if they can't really handle not being seated, then you would need to seat them. And at the same time, I feel like probably the best way to do seating, but at the same time, this would be the most work for the teacher, would be to not give them the same seat every day. Just because I feel like putting them next to different people every day would be the best for them in terms of them getting different points of views, getting different, being next to different types of learners every day and interacting with different types of learners. I just feel like that variety will like allow them to just be overall more accepting people.
You know what we do for that? It's so funny actually. So they have like their assigned seats, but then like for group work, she has a chart she has a chart, like the seating chart on the projector, and then she separates certain blocks by colors. So then when it's group work, you sit with your color. So it's like when you're doing the turn to talk, yeah, it's the person next to you regularly, but when we're doing group work, it's not a daily switch, but it is a switch for the groups, which is kind of what Matthew's saying, which okay. I think works well. But it's true what you're saying. Mixing it up definitely helps.
I agree that it's a challenge. Like going in, all of our students are to Brooklyn Prospect. Like we've never met them before. We did start off with assigned seats, and from the first week and a half, we've learned a lot about like these kids definitely not sit together. And so we like just redid our seating chart after the first week and a half to reflect that like there are kids who definitely will never get along for group work, and we pair like say a student is really on task every day, we'll seat them next to a student who's really struggling with like the entrance routine so that they can help them with that or they can have that model for them. And the same thing with group work where we'll pair students who like are really struggling to work together in a group with students who are really good at like cooperating and like encouraging everybody to participate. But it definitely was hard, like this first week, because we just didn't know our students yet. So some of the seating was like a total mistake. We were like, these guys are just going to talk for the entire class or whatever. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're actually making a change now because even though my mentor knew all the students from 10th grade and because it's an 11th grade class now, she knew them, so she placed them on like where she thought was best. But then we have two students who I guess became best friends over the summer, and they are like all day nonstop. So she's like, yeah, we have to change that. So yeah, you make adjustments along the way.
You're like, I'm glad you're friends now.
Yeah.
Not in class.
Yeah, we got really lucky because we're actually I think I wrote that I was in a room with 3 other teachers, and one of the teachers was all of their ELA teacher last year. So she's like, okay, you can't sit these 2 people next to each other. So she kind of like helped us with the whole entire seating arrangement, even though it's changed a little bit since then.
That's so nice that you could like ask her for help with
that.
Lorraine, I like your shirt. Can I see?
Oh, thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, I got this at El Museo del Barrio. It's like the Young Lords.
It's literally so beautiful, and the garden across from it is also.
Yeah, the Young Lords. Yeah,
that's really good.
I think there was like a part in this culturally. I'm sorry, this was like my favorite reading out of all of them this week. But there's this section where they say like to create a social justice classroom, like to have that theme in the classroom. And that's something that my teacher mentor did from the get. He actually taught civil rights like the last unit of ELA last year. So he saved all the projects and he put them around the classroom. So the students overall are like really open to having these really heavy conversations. We just watched the Brown Eye, Blue Eyed experiment thing from the 60s. Have you guys ever watched that?
I don't think so.
Where like it was like this teacher in the 60s. She asked her students who were all white, do you know what it feels like to be black? And they were like, yeah, sure. And she's like, no, you don't, because you're not black. So she basically split up the class and segregated brown eyes from blue eyes, and the brown eyes were like the lower and blue eyes were the higher. So like we watched that with them, and they were able to have like a really great conversation and connected to the outsiders. It was really good. So that stood out to me, like having that.
Like, how do they differentiate? Like, what did they give to the brown eyes or the blue eyes that the other ones didn't get?
So the blue eyes got to go to recess 5 minutes before. They got to have seconds in the lunchroom. They could hang out with their friends. I think they could use the swings all throughout like recess.
How did you guys get all those, like, how did you get access to like seconds in lunch and like, I don't know, how did you?
No. This was an experiment that someone else did. They watched a video about it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you actually did this in your class.
No.
Like,
Imagine.
I thought you did too, though.
My God. But yeah, so I thought that was like really relevant, just like keeping that theme in like any classroom, especially in schools where Brooklyn's Prospect, where it's like a lot of integration. So yeah, I feel like that has helped us a lot, especially like considering the fact that all of the texts we're going to read have a lot to do with power dynamics.
I'm so glad that you guys are also thinking about how our students self-segregate, because that's like definitely going to be a challenge I foresee going forward. So like it'll be good for us to talk about as like how do we manage that too? Because
I guess because your students are new to the school, so they don't do that quite yet.
Well, so we have about like 10 white students, and it's like the first time that they've ever been a minority, and they like self-segregated so hard. So what we did was we made them sit with their advisory during lunch, and like all the advisory teachers would sit with them for the first week to kind of like force them to make friends with like non-white students. And I think that definitely worked, but we're gonna also try to do lunch tables seated by interest. So like a lot of our students are into sports or like fashion design or drawing. So we're gonna try to do that too. But it's a challenge for us because we don't want students to like, we don't want all of the white students to leave the school because they're like, they feel like left out, or you know what I mean? But also like they need to branch out.
Michelle, so do you know that the 6th grade at Windsor Terrace is full? It's like basically white.
I heard that. So
I don't understand why they did that. Like they should have mixed these kids, even though like some are just coming to Brooklyn Prospect. Like what's the point of having them in separate middle school buildings like that? And then you're going to force them to go into high school together. Do you know what a mess that's gonna be? Like,
I feel like some of it has to do with the neighborhoods, because like the neighborhood in Clinton Hill is a much more minority centric neighborhood, while Windsor Terrace does have a lot more white people in it. So that might also have something to do with it. It's like a geographic location, but at the same time, I do agree that they should have mixed it up more.
They should have.
But that vision, that 2023 vision that they have, like, how are you gonna like make that work if you're separating these kids from the start? Like what I don't understand like the thought process.
I also I think they should have like some like cross school activities as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I guess it also just depends. Cross school activity would be awesome, but I think it also just depends on like who applies to the school. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I'm not sure. But I think this would probably be a good ending spot, but like something for us to continue thinking about as we like go. How do we make sure our students are getting experiences outside of like their comfort zone?
Mm-hmm.
And also
Yeah,
taking care of each other too.
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording.